Hi, we're back. And I want to talk a little bit now about this 40-minute wait that we have in the record, this discrepancy over the 40-minute wait that the officers that came to Ruth Paines House in Irving said that they waited 40 minutes down the street before they went in. Now, as we discussed, the situation is that they say that they're waiting for the Irving police officers, but we know that one phone call would have put those Irving police officers on the ready, there and waiting. They probably would have got there before the Dallas police officers did. When you think about the distances and the times it would have taken from them to come from both the same, from their equal opposite police stations. So we have to now think about what that was about and what was going on there, that these officers would make this decision to put in a 40-minute waiting period, and how and why have we got that? So we need to understand that it has been said that Michael Paine turned up at that garage at exactly the point when those officers were in it. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because we know that Michael Paine worked at least an hour's drive away at Bell Helicopter in Fort Worth. So it would take him an hour each way to get there. So we need to look at the timeline here. If President Kennedy has been shot, as we know, and killed at 12:30, so the assassination took place at 12:30, we know then that the world was told of the death of President Kennedy at 1:38 by Walter Cronkite. So we have to go back and we have to look at how this kind of plays out with Michael turning up at that garage at 2:45. How did he know to do that? Now, on the record, it does talk about Ruth and Michael Paine had a phone call with each other. So Michael Paine was at his place of work, and around 1:30ish, he placed a call to Ruth, and they were overheard by an operator on the other end, and they were discussing the events that were just unfolding, and they were saying things like, "We both know who is responsible for this. We both know." And the name Lee Harvey Oswald was mentioned at that point. Now, what we need to remember is that it's likely in 1963, no mobile phones, that Michael Paine was accessing a public phone in a cafe, foyer area, public area of his workplace. He actually says in the record that he went and was seen in the cafeteria, and I believe that was actually an alibi. So what's happening here is that he is indeed phoning Ruth from there at that time. That's absolutely correct. But he's having a conversation about the events before they're known to the world. So this indicates to me that this couple have foreknowledge. Now, this is really, really, really important, isn't it? Because I'm saying then they have conspired in the plot to kill President JFK in their own way, or they've at least conspired in the plot to set Lee Harvey Oswald up for the killing of the president in whatever capacity they are involved in that regard. Okay, so let's just think about Michael's movements then. Howard Brennan, who was a witness to a movement of a person in the window of the 6th floor during the assassination, was interrogated and put on the stand by the Warren Commission, and he said that he saw somebody in the sniper's nest moving around. What he didn't tell them, but what he told researchers later, was another significant fact that he didn't think was so significant at the time. And that was that he saw a blue and white Oldsmobile parked outside of the side entrance of the TSBD. Not Elm Street, but Houston, kind of round the corner, the side entrance. So the shots go off, chaos, 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 and in the quiet moments just after that, when everything invariably is in slow motion, he noticed that car, that Oldsmobile, had moved off and moved away. So it was there momentarily during the period of the minutes of the assassination. We don't know for how long. Maybe a couple of minutes. It seems that he suggested it was parked shoddily, so it wasn't parked close to the curb. It was probably driven in, kind of slanted in, just kind of stopped there. Which is, I guess, why he noticed it, and the fact that it had gone moments afterwards. Now, I believe that was Michael Paine in that car. And I believe that because we have another sighting of a blue and white Oldsmobile being used by an impersonator of Lee Harvey Oswald. And I'm going to tell you what happened there. So, several weeks beforehand, a couple walk into a furniture store and they are interested in buying furniture, and the store clerk, a lady, remembered this couple. She remembered that the woman was Russian. The man spoke in Russian to her. But what's really interesting is that in the record, when she was interviewed about this sighting, she talks about the woman coming out of the car and children following on, which clearly implies that these children were walking, so they were of walking age. Now, when we look at Marina, we know that she had June, and June would have been around 2 years old at the time of the assassination, and she had a baby just 2 weeks before. So if this lady is talking about children following on, she's not talking about one child. She's talking about more than one child, isn't she? And she's talking about children that can walk, which is super interesting. Now, I believe that sighting was Michael Paine, Marina, June, who is the Oswald's older daughter, and Lynn Paine, which is Ruth and Michael's daughter, just out with her daddy, and a baby in arms, who the store clerk cooed over as well. It's really interesting when the record starts to trip over itself and gives descriptions, and what we're doing here is we're starting to unpick what's actually being said and really thinking through the implications of what is meant and what is said, and how actually the investigation twisted things to make things fit. So make no mistake, there was children plural, there wasn't one child. So this is not a sighting of Marina and Lee, this is a sighting of Marina and Michael Paine. Now, Michael Paine, we know from our research, was able to talk Russian, speak in Russian, communicate in Russian. Maybe not as well as Ruth could. But certainly he did. This couple were part of a white Russian community. They had been engaged in a project to connect with Russian emigres and Russian people, and they were corresponding with people in Russia. So when you're talking to people in Russia, you're going to be talking in Russian. And Michael actually admits that he had been corresponding to people in Russia. So we can fairly well assume he knew Russian also. So if he knew Russian also, it's not beyond the realms of possibilities that he walked into this store and was talking in Russian to Marina. And they drove up in a blue and white Oldsmobile. And that's the point I'm trying to make here, that the car is very similar. When we look at pictures of Michael Paine in those days, he does bear a resemblance to Lee Harvey Oswald. And if you were taking in an idea about somebody, but you weren't realising the significance of that person, you would describe them, and the description 2 or 3 weeks later would be the same as your suspect, because you're not really paying attention to the man's features. There's no need for you to do so. So you don't realise the significance of it at the time. So this is, I believe, what this lady in this store did. Now, The man, we believe Michael Paine, actually asked the store clerk if they had a gun department in this store, to which the lady said, no, we don't. And the man made a very big issue of asking for a gun part called a plunger. So this clearly is an imposted sighting of Lee Harvey Oswald in order to produce some evidence, produce a trail of an idea that this man would be wanting to have purchase a gun part ahead of the assassination. Okay, so let's think about our timeline now. If Michael was nothing to do, had nothing to do with the assassination whatsoever, he would have learned the name Lee Harvey Oswald with the rest of the world at 3:05 in the afternoon. Okay? At that point, in all of our minds, in my mind, if that was me, I would be then thinking, that name rings a bell, that man has been in my ex-wife's home, his wife is there, I better check, I'm needed, I want to be there, something's kicking off, I need to sort this out. And I would have been doing that when I'd heard that name for the first time over the media. It would be a panic. So we know that went out on TV at 3:05, roundabouts. So it takes an hour to drive from Fort Worth to Irving. So that puts Michael's arrival at 4:10, roughly. But we're being told in the record that Michael turned up at 3:45. Can you see that does not fit? But what it does fit is this 40-minute wait down the street, of course, doesn't it? Okay, they had to say that he'd been somewhere, and it had to give enough time for him to assumedly come from where he was coming from, having already released the name of Lee Harvey Oswald to the media. But of course it's not enough time, because we know that it takes an hour. So here's what I believe happened. Michael Paine pulls up outside the Texas School Book Depository at 12:30 and receives a package. Okay, he receives a package which he then puts in the car. He then drives all the way to his place of work for 1 hour, which puts him there about 1:30. Okay, just in time to come into the cafeteria there. People are still on their lunch break. His colleagues would see him there, and he would phone Ruth from there with witnesses to say that he had done that. They have this conversation about, we both know who's responsible. He gets back in the car and he drives all the way to Irving at that point, and he walks into the garage bang on time, bingo, at 2:45. And I believe that's exactly the timeline that we're following here. I believe that's the correct sequence of events. Now, I believe that the package that Michael Paine was receiving at the Texas School Book Depository contained the backyard photos. And we're going to talk about that at another time, because I don't want to get into that just at the moment. But that's what I believe was happening at that point. He created an alibi. It was fudged by the cops, and this is the series of events I believe that we've got to the bottom of, and we've sorted it out what his role was here.